All right, so get ready to really dive deep into the marriage market today. You sent over this really interesting research paper
Yeah.
from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
And let me tell you, it's got some head-turning findings about how we choose our partners in the age of dating apps.
Yeah, it really challenges some common assumptions.
Right.
We hear so much about how online dating has revolutionized everything, right? But this paper really digs into the data and paints a more nuanced picture, I think.
Right, because you think with millions of people swiping left and right,
Right.
our love lives would look totally different than they did, back in the day, and
Yeah.
who we end up with.
Exactly. Yeah.
But this research analyzed U.S. marriage trends from 2008 to 2021,
Okay.
a time when online dating went from practically unheard of
Right.
to how more than half of all couples meet.
Yeah.
And the findings are surprising, to say the least.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is that, despite this massive shift in how people are meeting each other, right? The underlying preferences for the characteristics of the partners that people are choosing have remained strikingly consistent.
So even though we have a much larger pool of potential partners than ever before,
Yeah.
our core criteria for who we're looking for haven't really changed.
Exactly. Yeah, it seems like, even with all the options that online dating provides, are sort of deeply ingrained preferences, which, are often shaped by, societal norms, maybe even, evolutionary biology.
Right.
Those remain incredibly powerful.
Okay.
It's almost as if our brains are still playing matchmaker, in this digital age.
It really makes you wonder, are we really in control of our choices, or are we just hardwired to seek out certain types of partners?
Right.
But before we get too deep into the psychology of it all,
Sure.
you mentioned this research also took a look back in time, comparing recent trends to marriage patterns, dating back to the 1960s.
Right.
What kind of shifts did they find over this longer period?
Yeah, so that's where things get even more interesting. I think while these sort of core preferences like attraction and shared values have remained relatively stable,
Okay.
we do see some slow but, statistically significant shifts in what people are prioritizing in a partner.
Okay.
So, for example, the research highlights a growing emphasis on similar income and skills,
Okay.
even more so than education level.
So shared ambition
Yeah.
and earning potential are becoming more important than just having a diploma.
Yeah, it seems that way.
That's a pretty big deal. And it makes you think about, the rise of women in higher education in the workforce during that same time frame.
Absolutely.
Like those things seem connected.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. As more women pursued higher education and entered the workforce in greater numbers, it really kind of reshaped the dynamics of the marriage market, right? So that's a key factor that we'll kind of unpack further as we go deeper into this research.
Okay. This actually ties into how the researchers used an economic model to explain partner choice,
Yeah.
which at first glance might seem kind of cold and calculating
Right.
when we're talking about love and relationships.
Yeah, it does sound a bit unromantic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To think about it that way. But their findings actually make a lot of sense when you think about it.
Right.
Essentially, they found that our search for a partner isn't just random.
Mhm.
We're actually quite strategic, even if we don't consciously realize it. We tend to focus our efforts, whether online or offline, on certain criteria.
Right.
And this targeted search significantly impacts who we ultimately end up with.
So it's not just a matter of stumbling upon the one,
Right.
but rather a more deliberate process
Exactly.
of filtering and selection.
Yeah. Much more deliberate. Yeah.
Tell me more about this targeted search.
Sure.
What are some of the key factors that drive our choices?
Yeah, so the study actually found that, the strongest filter that people seem to be applying is race,
Okay.
followed by age and then education. And this isn't to say that, everyone's consciously going about this with a checklist, right?
Right.
But these factors tend to play a significant role in shaping our perceptions of potential partners.
It's fascinating how even when people say they're open-minded,
Yeah,
their actions might reveal a different story.
absolutely. Yeah.
But if it's not just about demographics, what about the role of location?
Right.
There's that whole idea that we're more likely to marry people who live near us, the whole love's just a zip code theory.
Right. Exactly.
Did the researchers find any evidence to support that?
Well, so that's a common assumption.
Mhm.
And while there's, no denying that geographic segregation exists, right? People often cluster in neighborhoods with others who share similar incomes and backgrounds.
Right.
The study found that it doesn't necessarily mean we're more likely to marry those people
Okay.
simply because of proximity.
Okay.
And they were very careful in this research to really distinguish between correlation and causation here.
So even though we might live near people who are similar to us in terms of income and education, that doesn't automatically translate into a higher likelihood of marrying within that group.
Precisely. Yeah. And just like geographical segregation doesn't dictate who we end up with,
Okay.
the research also debunked another common myth
Okay.
that the endless choices of online dating have made us pickier as a society.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It's easy to assume that with millions of profiles at our fingertips, we'd all become way more selective,
Right.
like holding out for someone who checks every single box. But the research actually suggests that that's not necessarily what's happening.
So if it's not our zip code or the overwhelming number of options online, what is driving this trend towards choosing partners with similar earning potential? We talked earlier about the rise of women in higher education and the workforce.
Right.
Could that be a major factor?
Absolutely. Yeah, the study really points to that societal shift as a key driver, right?
Okay.
So as more women entered these higher paying professions,
Right.
it stands to reason that they would start placing a higher value on partners who share, similar ambitions and earning potential, right?
Yeah. Like the whole game change.
Exactly.
Not just in terms of who we're meeting, but also in what we're looking for in a partner.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this brings us to another important point highlighted in the research,
Yeah.
the impact of these evolving partner choices on income inequality.
Right. And this is where it gets really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And honestly, a bit more complex as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people hear income inequality and their eyes kind of glaze over.
Sure.
But the way this research connects it back to our individual choices in the marriage market is fascinating. It's not just about individual salaries anymore,
Right.
but how those salaries are combining within households.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And the study actually estimates that changes in how we're choosing partners, particularly this shift towards similar incomes and skills,
Right.
account for almost half the increase in household income inequality that we've seen,
Wow.
which is a really striking statistic when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
To put it very simply, when people with higher earning potential marry each other,
Right.
it can really amplify existing economic disparities.
So while we might think of, choosing a partner as this deeply personal decision,
Yeah.
this research suggests it also has these broader societal implications, particularly when it comes to something as significant as income inequality.
Yeah, and I think it really underscores that interconnectedness, right, of our personal lives and these larger societal trends.
Mm-hmm.
And it really highlights how important it is to, to understand these dynamics
Yeah.
so that we can have, more informed conversations about these really kind of complex issues.
It's a lot to unpack, but the more we understand these patterns and the factors driving them,
Right.
the better equipped we are to navigate this new landscape of love and relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of navigating this landscape, one of the things that really struck me about the research was how much emphasis it placed on really kind of the limitations of online dating
Right.
in truly changing the game, right? So despite having access to a wider pool of potential partners than ever before, the study seems to suggest that our deeply ingrained preferences, whether they're influenced by societal norms or, perhaps even our evolutionary past,
Right.
are still playing a really significant role in shaping our choices.
It's like, even with all the algorithms and data points,
Yeah.
our brains are still the ultimate matchmakers.
It seems that way. Yeah.
But this actually leads perfectly to our final point,
Okay.
which is perhaps the most thought-provoking.
Yeah.
If our brains are the real bottleneck in finding a partner,
Mm-hmm.
not just algorithms or where we happen to live,
Yeah.
what does this mean for the future of love and relationships?
Right.
In an increasingly complex world, it's almost like we've got all this technology, right,
Yeah.
designed to help us find the perfect match.
Right.
But if our own brains are kind of stuck in these predictable patterns, are we really any closer to finding true love?
Yeah.
Or are we just, you know, optimizing for compatibility
Right.
within those preset parameters?
Yeah. That's a really interesting question, and I think it really gets to the heart of why this research is so compelling, right? Because it suggests that simply having more choices, right?
Right.
Like we do now with online dating, doesn't necessarily lead to better outcomes
Okay.
or more fulfilling outcomes, right?
Yeah.
We might have access to millions of profiles,
Oh, yeah.
but we're still operating within the confines of our own, cognitive biases and these societal influences.
So where do we go from here? If if our brains are the limiting factor, not the technology itself,
Yeah.
does that mean we're destined to keep repeating these same patterns,
Well,
even as the world around us changes?
I don't necessarily think it's a deterministic situation, right? I,
Right.
I think, while this research highlights that these preferences, a lot of them are really enduring,
Yeah.
it also underscores how important it is to really try to understand these influences, right?
Yeah.
Because I really do think the more we become aware of the factors that are shaping our choices,
Hmm.
the more agency we have to at least question those influences
Yeah.
and maybe even, challenge them in some cases.
That makes sense. If we can at least
Mm.
recognize when our type might be leading us down a familiar path,
Yeah.
maybe we can be more open to other
Yeah,
possibilities.
yeah, absolutely.
But it makes you wonder, what if we could somehow leverage technology to help us break free from these patterns?
Mm-hmm.
What if instead of just presenting us with more options,
Right. Yeah.
it could actually help us, broaden our horizons and make more informed choices?
No, that is a fascinating thought. What if AI, with its ability to analyze, these massive data sets and identify patterns that we might not even be aware of,
Right.
what if it could actually help us navigate the complexities of the marriage market,
Okay.
in a more nuanced way?
So instead of just showing us profiles of people who fit our perceived criteria,
Right.
it could actually kind of challenge our assumptions
Exactly. Yeah.
and introduce us to someone who might be a great match,
Right. Yeah.
even if they don't, tick all the usual boxes.
Yeah, I mean, I love that idea.
Okay.
Right, because it could really help us to move beyond some of our own biases
Right.
and potentially open up this whole new world of possibilities.
That's a pretty exciting, albeit slightly futuristic idea.
Sure, sure, sure.
So I can't help but wonder if we did kind of hand over the reins to AI matchmakers,
Yeah,
what would that mean for the future of love and relationships?
yeah.
Would we be surrendering too much control? And how do we ensure that these algorithms, even with the best intentions,
Right, right.
don't end up perpetuating the same biases
Right.
we're trying to escape?
Yeah, no, those are really critical questions, and I don't think there's any easy answers here. But it's definitely a conversation that we need to be having
Right.
as we enter this new frontier.
Hmm.
But I think, ultimately, whether we fully embrace AI matchmaking
Right.
or we decide to, stick to our own devices,
Yeah.
the most important thing is to really try to approach this whole process,
So-
with intentionality, with self-awareness,
Okay.
and maybe even, a little bit of healthy skepticism.
Absolutely.
Huh.
And who knows, maybe the real key to finding love in the digital age isn't about finding the perfect algorithm,
Yeah.
but rather about finding a better understanding of ourselves.
Well said. Well said. And on that note, this has been a really fascinating deep dive into a topic that's both, timeless and ever evolving.
It really is. A huge thank you to you for walking us through this research and offering such insightful perspective.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I always enjoy these conversations.
And to you, dear listener, for sending in this truly thought-provoking research paper.
Yeah.
Keep those deep dives coming. We'll be back next time with another fascinating exploration of the ideas shaping our world.